Because do you remember where Trump got the tariff thing from in the first place? Do you remember like when and why and how we started talking about tariffs in the first place? It was in his first campaign for president. Trump didn't really have any formal economic advisors. So he told his son-in-law, Jared, to find him an economic advisor. Trump reportedly gave Jared some vague ideas of what his thoughts were on economic issues. You know, something, make me look tough, China bad, something. Jared then decided to find his father-in-law a financial advisor for his presidential campaign by going on the Amazon.com website and starting to browse books. Not like reading the books, because you can't do that on the Amazon website. He was just looking at the covers, looking at the titles. And he found a book title that he thought was so cool. The title was Death by China. Oh my God, that's so cool. That's so awesome. And that apparently was it. Quote from Vanity Fair. Trump gave Jared a summary of his views and then asked him to do some research. Kushner simply went on Amazon, where he was struck by the title of one book, Death by China, co-authored by a man named Peter Navarro. Jared then cold called Navarro, a well-known trade deficit hawk who agreed to join the team as an economic advisor. Navarro was a major advocate for an aggressive pro-tariff policy. Where did Peter Navarro get his idea that tariffs would be a good policy for America? What was his backup for that conviction? Well, he did have backup from a real expert who he cited in at least a half dozen of his books, including the one that Jared found on Amazon that fateful day. In all of his books, Peter Navarro has cited an economics expert to justify his views. And the economics expert he cites is somebody named Ron Vera, V-A-R-A, Ron Vera. When Trump won the presidency and entered the White House, this Ron Vera started circulating a memo around Washington in support of Trump using tariffs in trade policy. According to the New York Times, the memo had been, quote, sent from an email address purportedly belonging to Ron Vera. At one point, Ron Vera wrote in the memo that Trump could, quote, ride the tariffs to victory. Problem is, Ron Vera doesn't exist. He never has. The economics expert that Peter Navarro has long cited to explain why he's so gung-ho on tariffs, this person, Ron Vera, is a made-up person. He is a fictional person. Peter Navarro invented Ron Vera as his expert source so he could quote this expert source over and over and over again in his crackpot books. Who is Ron Vera? Ron Vera is an anagram of Navarro, which is his last name. I mean, my name anagrams to Macho Wadler, but I don't see myself trying to talk you into doing what Macho Wadler wants, right? But that really is how the Trump administration crafted its tariff policy. That's where Trump came up with the tariff idea. Circulating a fake memo from a fake person with a fake email address in order to make it look like this was a serious issue being debated by real experts. That is the intellectual basis on which Donald Trump today wiped $6 trillion of wealth out of existence and crashed America's markets and brought America and the world to the brink of a self-inflicted, on-purpose, global Great Depression along the lines of what we had in 2008 and what the pandemic inflicted upon us in 2020. This time, the global disaster is Donald Trump's big brain.
Me, senior White House advisors, alter egos of the president, cannot be compelled to testify before Congress.
That is false. Peter Navarro speaking there today, just moments after learning the jury convicted him for exactly that. We're turning now to our deeper reporting on how we got here, because there was nothing inevitable about today's conviction. The DOJ traditionally does not seek criminal penalties for resistant congressional witnesses. But even resistant witnesses rarely do what Navarro and Bannon have now been convicted of. And Mr. Navarro is actually the first Trump aide convicted of anything related to Jan 6 who was in the White House during all the coup plotting. He may not be the last, depending on what happens in the Jack Smith probe and Georgia. Now, those are more complex cases. This one was not. A speedy trial that you can see right here. Jurors picked as the court came back into session after the holiday on Tuesday. Wednesday, they held the trial. Prosecutors took just 3 hours to present their whole case, which is a type of confidence. They're basically saying to the jury, here's the evidence. He defied. That's it. And the defense rested without any witnesses, partly because the judge had already rejected the privilege claim, so no witnesses on that. Today came the closing arguments, and this is the first time I'm able to tell you a little bit about this. We've been juggling the news. The prosecutors today said Navarro chose allegiance to Trump over the subpoena. That's contempt. That is a crime. They added Navarro made a choice not to comply with the subpoena. Our government only works when people play by the rules. That is a prosecutor's way of boiling it all down to saying, hey, if these folks can decide for themselves to break the rules, nothing else will hold. And although people may not think about it on a daily basis, our entire rule of law and court system involves people following requests for facts, evidence, and information. If the subpoena system breaks down, well, much of the rest of the system would too. Navarro's lawyers argued that he was completely distant and had nothing to do with what, quote, happened on January 6th, saying that was abhorrent. Did Navarro have anything to do with the violence? He did not. It is true. There's no evidence that ties Navarro to planning the violence. And in our interviews, he did publicly condemn it. But as this jury clearly understood, he wasn't on trial for that violence. He was on trial, again, for just ignoring, snubbing, and defying the subpoena, a kind of request that millions of people and companies have complied with on matters less important than probing this insurrection. Now, he was convicted regardless of the reasoning, but let me be clear. It didn't help Mr. Navarro's case that he was ducking, one, such an important probe, and two, that he'd given investigators clues of his involvement when detailing part of the coup plot in public, including in our interview last January, where he detailed their sweep or coup plot.
The remedy was for Vice President Pence, as the quarterback in the Green Bay sweep, to remand those votes back to the 6 battleground states.
Do you realize you are describing a coup?
No.
The January 6th committee first subpoenaed Mr. Navarro after that interview. When he defied, the committee cited that interview, among other things, as evidence for holding him in contempt, which the DOJ clearly found credible. That led to his indictment and then today's conviction. We can also tell that, like some other figures in this world who have done things that are blatantly breaking rules or laws and discussing it, which is traditionally called a confession, well, if you understand that mindset, it usually involves people who think they're above the law or don't expect to get held accountable. That appeared to be his mindset right after his very first arrest.
They put me in handcuffs, they bring me here, they put me in leg irons, they stick me in a cell. What they did to me today violated the Constitution.
False. No judge found anything like that, and a jury of his peers have convicted him, and he has been afforded the lawful and peaceful process of a defendant and now a convict. We heard a guest tonight say that this is exactly the kind of outcome that some of these people who are doing these things don't expect, and that there is a kind of Trump or MAGA political emphasis on pretending they'll never get caught for anything, that's become a sales point or a branding pitch. This is something we've discussed in many different ways on this program, and tonight, as this all comes together, I want to give the mic, give the voice on this very issue to someone we heard from who discussed other discrepancies and discrimination in our law and was marveling in a way at how much they seem to be getting away with on simple issues like a subpoena. This is, of course, before Mr. Navarro was ultimately convicted, but this is what Billy Porter said about all this.
If you're subpoenaed, you're required to go or they throw your ass in jail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what it's supposed to be?
Yeah, for just about everybody.
What's happening?
Yeah.
I don't understand what's happening. It's like, it's simple. Throw their asses in jail. I don't understand why they're not in jail. If I didn't show up for a subpoena, they would throw my black gay ass under the jail immediately. These people are walking free.
There's been a lot of double standards. That was a very direct way to call it out. Today, in this case, on this issue, well, Mr. Navarro is convicted, and he does face up to 2 years in jail.